to Awani Tonight with me, Soraya Mia. Government eyes reopening borders to foreign tourists. This as Malaysia transitions into Phase 3 of the National Recovery Plan on Monday. That's coming up. The Klang Valley, Putrajaya and Malacca will move to Phase 4 of the National Recovery Plan on October 18, while Kelantan, Perak, Penang, Sabah and Kedah will move to Phase 3 on the same day. According to Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob, with the transition phase for these states, Malaysia as a whole would now move to Phase 3. Starting Monday, time required for foreign visitors and close contacts of COVID-19 patients to quarantine is reduced to 7 days at home for those fully vaccinated and 10 days for those who haven't completed their shots. In-person meetings, conventions and exhibitions will also be allowed at 50% capacity for the fully vaccinated, provided they test negative. E-hailing vehicles can operate at full capacity from tomorrow, while rest and service stations will be allowed to operate 24 hours. Malaysia may do away with mandatory quarantine for fully vaccinated travelers from certain countries soon. Earlier today, Chairman of National Recovery Council Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin said the matter was discussed at the Council's meeting today as part of the government's consideration to reopen international borders to foreign travellers. Muhyiddin said the waiver will be part of the mutual recognition of vaccine certificates already adopted by several countries. The consideration is also based on the positive developments of the COVID-19 situation in the country. With the government already allowing interstate and inter-district travelling, as well as for those in Malaysia to travel overseas, Muhyiddin said the time is now right to similarly welcome foreigners in. Currently, foreigners can only enter Malaysia for emergency matters, business and official affairs. Malaysia has won a seat in the United Nations Human Rights Council for the 2022 to 2024 term. Ismail Sabri said Malaysia will work closely with the UN member states to advance the global human rights agenda. Malaysia obtained 183 votes to take one of the 18 seats at the council. This is the third time Malaysia sits in the council. The first time during the 2006 to 2009 term and subsequently for the 2010 to 2013 term. Sabri added that human rights must be kept at the center of all post-COVID-19 recovery efforts. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah says as a council member, Malaysia intends to prioritize the rights of vulnerable groups, particularly children, women, indigenous people and the elderly. Malaysia does not want Myanmar's junta chief, General Min Aung Hlaing, to attend the Southeast Asian Leaders Summit happening on the 26th to 28th October. Foreign Minister Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah stressed today that the country will not compromise if the general fails to honour his commitment to a peace plan.
I appreciate the fact that Minister Irwan is doing whatever that is humanly possible to fulfill his obligation and his mandate to realize the implementation of the 5-point consensus. However, this evening, I think we will be looking at the details of the proposed visit. If there is no real progress, then Malaysia's stand will remain that we do not want the general to be attending the summit. No compromise on that.
As Budget 2022 approaches, more are calling for the government to set up a gender-responsive budget, one that highlights the specific needs of men, women, boys and girls. Recognizing the need, Wanita PKR came up with a national gender action plan to address the gap. We speak to its chief, Fuzia Saleh, on the importance of putting on a gender lens when drafting the upcoming budget.
A gender-responsive budget is important because it enables the study of the impact of the budget on men and women, boys and girls. So you see, usually we just give out the budget, but we don't study the impact. So it's important in the gender-responsive budget, this is very important, to study the impact, to do the analysis, to monitor, and finally to come up with a suggestion or a policy on how men and women can have equitable access to resources.
Fuzia stressed how the current budget focused more on outcomes rather than the specific needs of each gender. She gave an example of domestic violence cases that were on the rise during the pandemic.
If we look at the pandemic, we can see that women suffer more during the pandemic. For example, we know that the number of domestic violence cases went up a few times, during the pandemic. And who are the ones who suffer most during due to this? And are we making sure that there is resources that is being given out, distributed for this very specific purpose? During the pandemic, we are so busy with our hospitals dealing with COVID, and this is, we are gender blind when it comes to dealing with COVID cases. However, when the domestic violence victims come to OSCC, a one-stop crisis center in hospitals, there are COVID hospitals, then they don't get shelters because they are not allowed to get shelters there. And where do they go? And everybody is all locked up, and finally they go back to the perpetrators. So you see, when you apply the gender lens, then you may be able to allocate some budget.
Fuzia also highlights the importance of an efficient data collection system as a first step towards setting up a gender-responsive budget. This is to allow better and targeted policy making and ensure that help really reaches those in need.
Moving forward, we do need to collect our data differently. We do need to have a disaggregated data, and we do need to highlight the different needs of the head of households. Male head of households and female head of households have different needs. Therefore, we do need to allocate the budget in response to those needs. For example, if I want to find out about single mothers just now, I've got to go to eKasih, and I've got to go to Zakat, I've got to go to JKM, I've got to go to schools to know whether they have single mothers there in their database. I need to go where? I need to go to KRT. There's so many agencies that I need to go to collect all those data. Our data is all over the place, as I said earlier. So we need to correct this, and we need to approach it differently. The Prime Minister talked about gender equality as the way forward for the 12th Malaysia Plan. If we apply gender responsive budgeting correctly, we should be able to correct our policies, have better policies with regards to gender mainstreaming, and hopefully we will change our course with regards to the gender equality gap, because we are now very low down.
We'll take a short break. Stay with us.
When the world was changing for photographic film, we helped change the world as a pioneer of the digital age. In healthcare, we're expanding what's possible with advanced technology. But why stop there when we can focus our AI and IoT expertise on business innovation, helping tackle some of the toughest challenges in the workplace? When it comes to innovating for a healthier world and a more sustainable society, we'll never stop. Fujifilm, value from innovation.
Agenda Nasional Malaysia Sihat ANMS bermatlamat menjadikan rakyat Malaysia sihat sejahtera. Kebersihan persekitaran adalah penting ke arah kelestarian alam sekitar. Kita bertanggungjawab ke atas persekitaran bersih dan selesa yang menyokong kesihatan. Kebersihan tanggungjawab semua. Jaga kebersihan persekitaran untuk kesejahteraan kesihatan. Agenda Nasional Malaysia Sihat, sihat sepanjang hayat.
Welcome back. The bill to amend the Wildlife Conservation Act 2010, tabled in Parliament earlier this week, is a step forward in strengthening wildlife protection in the country. Justice for Wildlife founder Dr. Nur Arlina Ahmad believes the new provisions would make it easier for authorities to prosecute offenders.
It should make the enforcement authorities work a lot easier, because oftentimes you can see that when people are promoting wildlife, say on social media, so it's really hard to sort of prosecute them because first off, they don't have the animal with them. So by having these new provisions, we can prosecute them under this particular provision for promoting wildlife. Yeah, so that I think on the enforcement side of things, that makes their job a lot easier.
On Monday, Energy and Natural Resources Ministry tabled 2 new provisions, Section 88A and 88B, to allow punishments for those who organize wildlife shows and promote wildlife. Arlina said Section 88B of the bill, which highlights promoting any wildlife or its derivatives for business as an offence, will increase public awareness of the illicit activity and hopefully decreases demand in the market.
This would be very helpful if, say, if I don't have like a business, for example, but I have wildlife and I'm promoting it, say, on my TikTok account. So that would be an offense. Yeah, so that is the one thing that the general public should know, is that you don't just have to like have wildlife with you. Promoting them is also an offense.
She added that raising awareness on the Wildlife Conservation Act 2010, or known as WCA, and its offences is essential to protect wildlife and endangered species in Peninsular Malaysia. Laws pertaining wildlife in Sabah and Sarawak are separate, where the WCA cannot supersede the 2 statutes despite being a federal legislation. Taiwanese officials have set up an independent commission to investigate a fire that killed 46 people at the rundown building in the southern city of Kaohsiung. Police said they are also questioning a woman and a man over the fire that broke out early Thursday. In Taipei, lawmakers held a minute's silence to pay tribute to the victims. Mayor of Kaohsiung, Chen Chi-mai, announced that an independent team will investigate whether negligence contribute to the tragic fire. Of the 46 dead, Shen said there were 21 who had still not been identified. The 13-story structure was a former department store and was home to some of the city's most underprivileged residents, including the poor, elderly, and disabled. Many appeared to have been trapped in their apartments when the fire broke out at the ground floor. The fire looks set to be Taiwan's deadliest in years. The last fire of a similar magnitude was in 1995, when 64 people perished inside a packed karaoke club. Sydney will allow entry of fully vaccinated travellers from overseas starting November 1st, without the need to quarantine. However, this is only limited to Australian citizens for the time being.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison said the federal government has yet to decide when to allow other categories of visa holders, like international tourists and students, to enter Australia. The move to reopen borders to Australians, residents and their families come as New South Wales is expected to reach an 80% first-dose vaccination rate on Saturday. Thailand has introduced a new policy to ease travel into the kingdom ahead of its border reopening on November 1st. The web-based Thailand Pass system will replace the issuance of certificate of entry, whereby travelers will only need to fill in their information online and upload related documents before traveling. Thailand will open to fully vaccinated tourists from low-risk countries next month. The Philippines has lifted the quarantine requirement for fully vaccinated travelers coming from its green list that includes over 49 countries and regions with low number of COVID-19 infections. Malaysia is not listed under the green list.
COVID-19 health passes became mandatory for all workers in Italy starting today. The Green Pass, a certificate showing that people have been vaccinated, recovered or tested negative for COVID-19 within the previous 48 hours, is now compulsory for all public and private sector workers.
Police stepped up security at sensitive locations such as ministries and state institutions in anticipation of protests against the measure. Prime Minister Mario Draghi's cabinet approved the rule in mid-September, seen as one of the world's strictest anti-COVID measures. Under the new rules, those without a certificate will be suspended without pay and face a fine of up to 1,500 euros if they try to work on regardless. The Green Pass affects 23 million workers and will be in place until year-end.
Looking at the multiple dimensions of deprivation will give policymakers a comprehensive picture of poverty for targeted programs. But will the government step up? Tonight on Consider This, we speak to Pematang Pauh MP Nurul Izzah Anwar about multi-dimensional poverty in Malaysia. That is all we have for you on Awani Tonight. Get the latest news updates on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines from astroawani.com and Astro Awani app. I'm Soraya Mia. We'll see you soon.